said he's gonna donate some paint that he has.
Oh, that was
Oh,
nice.
that's nice.
Does he have a card? Because I could use that handy person.
Okay, I'll ask for a couple.
Oopsie.
Yeah, there's been a couple Sundays where I'm rushing out of the house and I get in there, have my coffee, but I didn't grab breakfast, and then there's a plate of muffins.
Well, you never have to worry when you
And
come
I'm like,
here, I
oh,
don't think.
Diane brought muffins. She
I don't
saved
think
me
you
in the
have a
morning.
worry in the world about that.
Yeah, there's always, at least there's always like.
Even some applesauce left from Vacation Bible School there in the refrigerator.
Granola bars.
Yes.
Hey, Carol, not a Carol, what's your name twice? I don't know if you saw about dinner tomorrow night, but I wanted to at least offer it to you, but if not, I'm gonna order food in.
Oh, I thought
The-
somebody else was doing tomorrow.
They couldn't do it tomorrow.
Oh.
They're sick. Katie Miner, she's got COVID.
Oh.
Yep.
But
if it's too soon, I was gonna order something like Papa John's, Papa Joe's, Is that what it was? Little Joe's.
Little Joe's. I mean, I could go to the store tomorrow. I don't, what do I have tomorrow? Nothing tomorrow other than, I can do it tomorrow.
Are you
I'd be
sure?
glad to help you.
Oh, there you
I
go.
would help you.
Well,
Did you
I
wanna-
don't know what
What you got
I'm
in
doing
mind,
yet.
yeah.
I just like,
Yeah.
Well, there's probably anticipate about 15 to 20 people,
okay.
20 leftovers and all, and an entree, maybe a side dish salad or something.
Right.
Is that okay? All right. Then you're off the hook for the November
For the
3rd.
last one?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And then maybe Katie will be better by then and then she'll handle it.
Well, if she's not, I can probably handle it. Really? Does that mean you're a cook or?
Well,
Who says?
not when there's pressure on.
Oh.
If it's
Well,
just me.
who's putting pressure?
No
You.
pressure.
It's just the loss.
Katie said she's just gonna like order something like Joey's or something like that.
Is that, what's that?
I don't know.
Chicago.
I think it's pizza.
Lamb beef sandwiches in it, and now people are around the country are learning what those.
I
are.
know exactly what that show is. It's
What-
good.
what
I'm
show?
watching it slowly. It's called The Bear.
Okay.
It's a fictional show about a Michelin star chef
Okay.
who's probably like 30, and he goes back home to take over his brother's Italian beef shop in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
And it's based on a real shop, but it's got a different name. And
Where is
he's
this?
basically like a fancy French chef who is like, or French trained chef who is like back in
And now it's
Chicago, like making
sweet or hot,
sandwiches.
wet or dry.
And he's like really
Yeah.
demanding, and the staff is like, it's just sandwiches, dude. Like,
What
it's a really good
channel
show.
is it on?
It's on Hulu. It's called The Bear.
Oh, Diane's got that.
Yeah,
I
Diane.
don't know. I'm often consumed by loss.
I'm behind.
Talked about 2 weeks ago.
There we go. Sorry. Say that one more
I
time.
was just gonna give you a brief rundown of something we talked about 2 weeks ago, which is the axial age. That's AXIAL, axial. And it refers to like an axis, whereas like a wheel, the hub is called the axis, and everything kind of rotates around it. It's kind of a center from which other things radiate. And what the axial age refers to specifically, it was proposed by a German philosopher by the name of Karl Jaspers. And he noticed that there were some broad changes in religious thought in a variety of locations throughout the civilized world from the 8th through the 3rd century BCE. What was happening was in a variety of places that were fairly widespread, there was a kind of universalizing about modes of thought. And what that means is, previous to that time, pretty much most cultures looked at their cultures and their gods as very local. There were local deities that supported you, took care of you, helped you win wars, things like that. But at this point, in these centuries, there was a universalizing the thought of a God that goes beyond just a tribal deity that helped you and you alone, but began to take a look at universal concepts like good and evil, just a God of all creation, some movement towards monotheism rather than, a lot of deities. And these changes can be seen all throughout the civilized world, from Persia, India, China, the Levant, which is Southwest Asia, Greco-Roman world, and more to our point, it can be seen in with the Hebrews. And this theory isn't entirely accepted by all historians because they're not really sure how these ideas spread between cultures, if they were affected or by one another, or if they were just kind of popped up independently. Some people think that maybe the spread of trade and money, and along with that, then ideas spread. People say that there was a more universal use of writing. And then it had to do with, sometimes there was time between these large empires that were there between the Persian Empire and the Babylon, when the Babylonian Empire fell to Persia, and then there was the Assyrian empires. But anyway, so we talked about there was a universalizing, more transcendent thoughts, and this happened lots of places in China with I'm not going to get into all the places and the people that, if you're more interested, we can you can look that up. I looked it up, but there's just a lot of different examples of Buddhism changed, and in China, India, all these places, this broad movement towards universal and transcendental thought came about. But for our purposes, it happened with the Hebrews as well. And we're not quite sure how other ideas might have affected them, whether they did or they don't. But if you look at the text of the Old Testament, there are some prominent examples of, like, the creation narrative and the flood narrative, where there are narratives in the world from other places at that time that preceded them. But anyway, at this time, we're looking about 1 Samuel. We're talking about the rise of looking at a universal God. And then we're talking about, specifically in Samuel, we're talking about where the prophets begin to arise, where Samuel is kind of the first prophet. And at the same time, the rise of a monarchy, where Saul is the first king. And kings were in charge politically, but prophets were very important to Israel too, because they held the kings accountable. And we'll see that further in Samuel, where Samuel holds Saul accountable. And then later on in 2 Samuel, Nathan holds David accountable, which is, and the prophets represented this universal kind of transcendental thought, where they were supporting things like justice and righteousness, things beyond just the interest of the local king or that particular nation. So I think it's important to look at the context of 1 Samuel. Partially the context of 1 Samuel, when it was written, or when what the time frame it was talking about, but more important, the context from which it was written, which was somewhere around 630 to 540 BC. And that was after the first exile and very near the Babylonian exile. It was either just before or during the time they were under siege, or maybe just after they had been exiled. And this was a way, Samuel and these other historical books were a way of establishing the fact that the Hebrews were God's chosen people at one time, that he had chosen them, he had given them a monarch, he'd given them these prophets, and that they could return to that. It was a way of looking at their bad situation then and looking forward to a time when they would return to being God's people. So it's important to look at that in terms of the Old Testament, the context of when it was written, but also it's interesting to look at the fact that this whole axial age and what happened, for example, in Greek philosophy, that has a pretty big impact on Orthodox Christianity. The way we understand Orthodox Christianity is probably as much Greek philosophy as it is actually directly extrapolated from the Bible. You look at Plato, and you look at the way he was used by Augustine, Aquinas, and some of the church fathers. This has a big impact on where we are today in terms of orthodoxy. So this age, where these different ideas came about and way the world and the civilized world began to view God and morality, still impacts us today. It's founded, that's why they call it the axial age. It forms the foundation for many of our moral and religious values that we have right now. And so and there may be another axial age or something similar to it where our values shift a little bit now, but just to understand that Western thought, the way we think, and is very much affected by the changes that were happening all over the world at approximately the same time. So that's what we were talking about when we were talking about the axial age.
Wow.
It's
That's
amazing.
really
Thank
interesting.
you. It is.
I think it plays into a lot of the end of the last chapter too, which is the it's not just the death of Eli, but the removal of the ark and Eli's daughter-in-law's kind of words to say, the glory of God has departed from this place, and I just think that phrase speaks on multiple levels and is talking about what's happening to Israel at that exact moment in that axial age, which is they're kind of in between or entering into another exile. And it's like every major moment, maybe we've had a little one of the last few years or so of just wondering, has God abandoned us? Has God departed? That may not be an axial age example. I'm also thinking, David, like another axial age to a lesser degree would have been the kind of the 1500s and Martin Luther and some of these other, just a big cultural shift to just say the Catholic way is not the only way. You get these seismic every 1,000 years, these major religious
Would you
things.
consider the Ecumenical Council in 1963 that Pope John the 23rd
Yeah.
made
A lot of
it?
these things are profound shifts, but I think so far most of these shifts have been based on thoughts that came about at this critical time. And
Right.
they are very, very important shifts. They're cultural shifts and sociological shifts, but moral shifts and religious shifts. But a lot of this is still based on pretty much the thoughts and the view of God that we have now is very much still in that Western, that the philosophical and the tradition that arose out of the time of the prophets. And it like I say, it may shift further. There may be more. Maybe there's a move now to look at God not so much as other, but as within everything. Maybe that'll move towards But yeah, these are all profound shifts, and they do happen throughout history. It's just
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what happens if we're around long enough.
Right. Yeah.
Some of you have a better chance than I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's fascinating, this idea that when you start having trade and connecting the world, that you have to start thinking, well, this is what we think is right and wrong, and the morality or the deities in our village. But now what's universal? And I'm when you're talking about like what's coming next, I wonder if, because the internet now connects us, not just that fact other people exist, but the minutia, this is what I ate for breakfast.
Right.
And this idea of
Here's
maybe
me
like,
opening up a gift package.
yeah, more intimate like relationship with God and all the details, or how that's going to shift us, like
Yeah.
connecting us with just the nothingness, the tiny bits of our days, not just the fact other people exist, which it had to be
Yeah.
completely, just change your whole framework. But
I
yeah,
think that's really, that's
interesting.
great, Charity. I think it's important too that the internet has had a big impact on religious thought in the United States, especially with the, whether you want to call it deconstruction or whatever, that a lot of people really aren't finding support in their churches, their local churches, and their support groups, their church, their thoughts, the people they consider are coming from the internet and books that the people that they come into contact on the internet, and its impact on religion could really be profound. I think that's a good insight, Charity.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, with some of the Russia being in the news, but there's like my daughter is like, there's people on Instagram in Russia that she follows, and she's like, well, it's not the Russian people, obviously,
Right.
and it's not an awareness I would have had growing up in the 70s. Like Russia was the
They're
bad
all
guys
trying
at
to
the
kill
Olympics.
us. Yeah.
But for kids now, well, no, she went and had a bagel for breakfast, and then she like listened to this music that I also listened to, and it's almost like they have these like parasocial relationships with people all over the world.
Yeah. Well, and
So
your
it's just
other
curious
daughter
to me.
having a obsession with Armenian, not
Oh,
Armenian.
that's still same daughter. Yeah.
Oh, same daughter. Sorry. I was thinking. I thought you were talking about
Yeah.
Daisy. Sorry.
Oh
Yeah.
no, she likes this Algerian band
There you
that
go,
she
yeah.
got to see on Wednesday. But anyway, it's all but the tiny things.
Yeah, it is.
It's
It
just
is.
it's curious to me, David, how this is all going to work out. But thank you so much for doing.
This. Yeah. What a.
That's really
Fascinating,
interesting
absolutely
to me.
fascinating.
You get an A+ in your book report, young
Yeah.
David. Make up for all the years you were procrastinating. Well done.
For
So
making up and not doing my homework, right?
exactly. All right, so we're picking up for Samuel chapter 5. I just mentioned again the very last line of the previous chapter kind of ends a extended sequence about Eli, which is important because it's a culture shift as well. We know the dramatic irony is that God has not disappeared, but Phineas's wife says that she thinks God has departed them because the ark, the thing that the one object that they've kept with them as part of their culture for years and years and years, that they think this is where God resides and housed, that they've lost it to the Philistines, and and Eli has died, and there goes the end of the priests as the one who interpret God's word, which lays track for Samuel to become a prophet in the truest sense, a new kind of judge. But I wanted to preface this. Charity and Lauren caught me doing some homework today, which is really unusual. I was just sitting here reading ahead because I was remembering that we go off on a little tangent here in the next couple chapters about the ark, and I just wanted to just flag that first, and we'll talk about it after we read it. But there's kind of a narrative change here, almost like feels like a Quentin Tarantino movie where now we've switched to a story about some completely different people, and we'll be wondering how it connects at the end. Would anyone like to read the chapter 5? Is short enough. It's just about 12 verses actually.
I've got the message.
Okay, the Message, fantastic.
And the
You got-
title on mine is Threatened with Mass Death.
Oh,
Once the Philistines had seized the chest of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod, brought it into the shrine of Dagon, and placed it alongside the idol of Dagon. Next morning, when the citizens of Ashdod got up, they were shocked to find Dagon toppled from his place, flat on his face before the chest of God. They picked him up and put him back where he belonged. First thing the next morning, they found him again, toppled and flat on his face before the chest of God. Dagon's head and arms were broken off, strewn across the entrance. Only his torso was in one piece. That's why even today the priests of Dagon and visitors to the Dagon shrine in Ashdod avoid stepping on the threshold. God was hard on the citizens of Ashdod. He devastated them by hitting them with tumors. This happened in both the town and the surrounding neighborhoods. He let loose rats among them. Jumping from ships there, rats swarmed all over the city, and everyone was deathly afraid. When the leaders of Ashdod saw what was going on, they decided, the chest of God of Israel has got to go. We can't handle this, and neither can our God Dagon. They called together all the Philistine leaders and put it to them, how can we get rid of the chest of the God of Israel? The leaders agreed, move it to Gath. So they moved the chest of God of Israel to Gath. But as soon as they moved it there, God came down hard on that city too. It was mass hysteria. He hit them with tumors. Tumors broke out on everyone in town, young and old. So they sent the chest of God on to Akron. But as the chest was being brought into town, the people shouted in protest, "You'll kill us all by bringing in this chest of God of Israel." They called the Philistine leaders together and demanded, "Get it out of here. This chest of God of Israel. Send it back where it came from. We're threatened with mass death." For everyone was scared to death when the chest of God showed up. God was already coming down very hard on the place. Those who didn't die were hit with tumors, and all over the city cries of pain and lament filled the air.
Fabulous. Well. What,
Yeah.
My Bible
Yeah.
says they were afflicted with hemorrhoids.
I was gonna say.
okay.
I was hoping
Yeah.
somebody's translation said that, because that's the more accurate description. We had to,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, we had to kind of soften that down for the generations.
My footnote says it's bubonic plague,
Wow.
which
Yeah.
would
Oh.
have been big pustules on your
yeah.
body.
Yes, exactly.
So obviously it was not
Nothing good.
pleasant.
No.
Nothing
Nothing
good.
good.
Unpleasant, yes.
So a little bit of low hanging fruit, but what does this remind you of? Anything in the Old Testament? That's what I mean.
Like the plagues.
Yeah,
of
plagues
Pharaoh.
and all
exactly.
that.
Yeah, all the Pharaoh's
bugs
plagues
Like getting
with
Moses.
Moses, right? Because we've got rats, we've got some other things. Now, it's not an organized first, second, third, fourth, all the way down to 10, but there is something to be said about this ark. Again, somewhere Indiana Jones is pulling his hairs out, going, "It belongs in Israel in a museum," and much like I said in a sermon on Sunday, that sometimes you want something from God and you get way more than you bargained for. And in this case, the Philistines got way more than they bargained for. What else did you all think? Yeah, be careful what you want, you wish for. So especially, what do we know about God in the Old Testament up to this point? The more than murder, more than oh, it's fine, Barb, it doesn't matter. You need your hot tea, come on. More than murder, more than honoring your parents, more than lying. The most devious thing someone can do against God is to worship another idol. And what do we put the ark right next to the idol of a pagan god? And that's bad. That is very bad.
It was the idol. The idol was bowing before the Ark of the Covenant. So while he was bowing, he was honoring the idol was honoring the God of the Israelites, but the people didn't like this idea. They thought this was all wrong, that the idol shouldn't be doing that. And because they were so caught up in their own religion, their own way of thinking, and the God of Israel was supposedly the God. And so anyway, but I just thought that was interesting that Dagon was bowing before the ark.
Yeah, that seemed to act kind of like salt in the wound a little bit.
And I thought it was interesting. At first, it was like he just toppled it. Then it was like the arms came off, the head. It's kind of like, God, okay, I'm doing this once. Are you going to get the message? No, I'll hit you a second time. Will you get the message? So that he kept like, okay, until they finally had to move it. But it's like, okay, I'm trying to tell you something, people, you're not listening. So
I think it's interesting. I looked up the word that they used for tumors there.
Oh, yeah.
And in Hebrew, it's the word ophel or awful, and it literally means a mound or a fortress, kind of
Oh,
like that. And that's where it comes from. I wonder if it relates to the English word they used to use for hemorrhoids, piles, something like that. I don't know.
yes. Euphemisms, again, just like
Yeah.
other sexual of nature.
That's
Yeah,
spiritually significant, but anyway, so yeah.
exactly. Well, a lot of this has to do with, in Exodus with the Egyptians and Pharaoh, they're a little bit more spectacular. Think Cecil B. DeMille's depiction, it was written for that in many ways. Here, this says a lot about what Israel thinks of the Philistines. A few years ago, I was on an email chain with a few priests, and when priests are amongst themselves, we cuss like sailors and we do all that stuff, all the stuff we can't do in our day job. And this one priest who's a female, she's a priest in this diocese who's hilarious. Somebody was criticizing some kind of artwork or something, and she wrote back, "You Philistine." And I was like, I've never heard that before as an insult, like a joking insult. And I did some research and looked it up, and I was like, oh, right. And it just says the Philistines are equated with a really rough, uncultured, uncivilized group. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, it's like the Dothraki. Yeah, crude, exactly. Smelly, all that stuff, and less than human in some ways. So the the thing here is, what plight can you give to the Philistines that's the most humiliating and one that makes you blush the most is, oh, give them hemorrhoids, right? That they were trying to think of what's the most despicable thing that can happen to them, and that would be it. So it's all intentional, but got softened in the translation. Again, always good to be critical of your translation, because my NRSV says tumors, and that's a completely different thing than hemorrhoids. Isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry.
It's all right. Maybe it's John.
It is Betsy. She said that John's starting to wake up today.
Yay!
Prayers travel fast.
All right.
Yeah, the power of prayer once again.
Good. Any other questions or comments? Anybody on this? Okay. Let me just read, this is from Robert Alter, just explaining a little bit of some context of what you're reading here. The arc narrative at this point in chapter 5 leaves behind the house of Eli, Samuel, and the paramount question of Israel's leadership in order to tell a bizarre, satiric story of a battle between cult objects, the powerful Ark of the Covenant, which is conceived as the conduit for the cosmic power of Israel's God, and the idol of Dagon, vainly believed to be a real deity by the Philistines. The dominant tone of the story is kind of monotheistic triumphalism. Accordingly, themes from the story of the plagues of Egypt are replayed, though in a virtually scatological key. And so that phrase he says, monotheistic triumphalism, again, thinking of what David was saying about the axial age, here you have Israel making a huge stance here again, early in the Old Testament, of saying monotheism is the way. We are in the right. There is only one God. Everyone else who worships other gods, it's folly. This is the one God. It's not to say those other gods don't exist, which sometimes is, now we would say that, but it's basically say God is bigger than all those gods, which is why worshiping false idols is such a big deal to them. Okay, chapter 6. Who would like to read? A little longer chapter. Maybe go to oh, okay, Leslie. Maybe stop at verse 12 and see what happens.
That's right. That's right. I'm reading from the NRSV. The ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. Then the Philistines called out for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us what we should send. Tell us send with it to its place." They said, "If you send away the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed and will be ransomed. Will not his hand then turn from you?" And they said, "What is the guilt offering that we shall return to him?" They answered, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines, for the same plague was upon all of you and upon your lords. So you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the land and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand on you and your gods and your land. Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts after he had made fools of them? Did they not let the people go? And they departed. Now then, get ready a new cart and 2 milch cows that have never borne a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart. But take their calves home away from them. Take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart and put it in the box at its side the figures of gold, which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go its way, and watch. If it goes up on the way to town to its own land, to Beth Shemesh, then it is he who has done us this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by chance." The men did so. They took 2 milch cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. They put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the gold mice and the image of their tumors. The cows went straight in direction of the Beth Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left. And the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh.
Fantastic. Thanks, Leslie. Images of their tumors, and now we know the tumors is a euphemism for hemorrhoids.
Mhm. And they stuck these inside the ark with the tablets?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Wow, that's kind of blasphemous, don't you think?
There's something kind of, I mean, like, Alter said it's satirical. You're supposed to be somewhat comical, actually. Like they're making fun of the Philistines too.
Mhm.
Like, well, you touched the hot plate, you took the ark, this is what you get. And there's kind of a humiliation going on too. Yeah. See, David's cracking up. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, golden. I can't have
Hemorrhoid.
picture
Golden
gold
hemorrhoids. Yeah.
Yeah, what a great offering. Yeah, so
Isn't that great?
imagine the guy that they told to make that for him, the goldsmith. Yeah.
Well, it's
Makes
clear
sense.
that the Israelites got a kick out of it, so they're like, it's like reminding them of their humiliation by carving it in gold. It's like real. There's something really dark and yet kind of like ludicrous about it. It's really funny.
I agree.
Other thoughts, everybody? Do you even get a phrase in here in let's see, was it in the translation Leslie read? Verse 6. Yeah. Verse 6, why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh harden your hearts? So if you didn't get that there was a connection to Exodus and the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, remember that phrase, which is problematic because it then goes, wait a minute, is God making Pharaoh do mean things, or what? The answer is it's unclear. But that phrase, harden your hearts, returns to kind of make the connection there. Look at some other notes here. Golden mice. Let's see. This is from Robert Alter. This episode concludes the arc narrative, brings to a climax the traits that set it off from the larger narrative of Samuel, Saul, and David in which it is placed. Instead of the sharply etched individual character portraits of the surrounding narrative, we only have one collective speaker and agent. I'm sorry, I read that all wrong. We have only collective speakers and agents. Instead of the political perspective with its human system of causation, the perspective is theological, and the culminating events of the story are frankly miraculous. God, who does not speak in this narrative, manifests God's power over the Philistines and the Israelites alike through supernatural acts in the material realm, as the strange tale of the cart and golden images vividly demonstrates. Which is another cool thing to look at. Israel, to the victor goes the spoils, and Israel tells the story. And the Philistines would have probably told the story a different way. But then Israel would say they can't even read or write. So, but anyway, in Israel's story, this kind of triumphant God is on our side tale here is also one that illustrates that this God that they worship, Dagon, has no power over Israel, but Israel's God, Yahweh, has power over the Philistines. So that's why our God is bigger than your God. Yeah.
I saw an interesting thing in the notes for the new Oxford New Annotated Bible and the Harper Common Study Bible. They suggest that maybe these tumors are bubonic plague, and then they say it's also in keeping with the plague of the mice and the rats, because they're often the fleas on them or the carriers. So that's just another possible.
Right. A great. Charity had flagged that too, and I think that's a great another example of the Hebrew language being both the language and the storytelling wants to leave a lot of room for interpretation, so that you can take away what you want to take away from it, which is really interesting.
I also just noticed that I didn't know that term milch cow,
Yeah.
and it means a cow that's never born a yoke. And so they'd be completely untrained and then pure for the ritual.
Yeah.
But also then that last verse where they turn neither to the right nor left, lowing as they went, sort of means the ark's being sort of divinely guided back.
Yes.
Because the cows would never have been yoked before.
Oh yeah.
So they wouldn't have been able to walk in pairs, like, together in tandem, in a team. Along the road, they wouldn't have known it.
Bingo.
So it's kind of like this idea that a cow who's never done this before knows the way. It's sort of like a nice little image, I thought.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of, in a couple months we'll be in Advent, we'll hear John the Baptist say, as he does every year, I'm here to make straight the way of the Lord. And it's kind of that idea of, for everybody in antiquity, if your road is unclear and you don't have GPS, and you're entrusting the road to these little cows, that they're going in the proper path in the straight line, means that God's involved. Yeah, it's really powerful. Another
nice image.
Another elbow to the Philistines. God's on our side, you guys. Sorry. All right, but we're still got more in the chapter 13 to the end. Leslie, do you want to finish reading?
That's fine.
Oh, great.
Now the people of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley. When they looked up and saw the ark, they went with rejoicing to meet it. The cart came into the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh and stopped there. A large stone was there, so they split up the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which were the gold objects, and set them upon the large stone. Then the people of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and presented sacrifices on that day to the Lord. When the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned that day to Ekron. These are the gold tumors which the Philistines returned as a guilt offering to the Lord: one for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, one for Gath, and one for Ekron. Also the gold mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, both fortified cities and unwalled villages. The great stone beside which they set down the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh. The descendants of Jeconiah did not rejoice with the people of Beth Shemesh when they greeted the ark of the Lord. and he killed 70 men of them. The people mourned because the Lord had made a great slaughter among the people. Then the people of Bethshemesh said, who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? To whom shall he go, so that we may be rid of him? So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you.
Fantastic.
What happened there at the end? God killed them, struck them down. Yeah.
A great blow. As in 4:8, the Hebrew for blow can also mean plague. If there is a historical kernel to this whole story, the epidemic ravaging the Philistines could have easily spread to the bordering Israelites, perhaps even through the agency of the cart and of the ark. Think again of Raiders of the Lost Ark, this time seriously invoking Indiana Jones, and he says, close your eyes, don't look at it. You don't even want to be caught in the vicinity of God's power at work. Yeah.
So the message says those 70 men irreverently peeked into the chest of God.
Yes,
And then
that's not good.
The other one says they just did not rejoice. That's why they got
I think so.
struck down.
Were they,
They didn't
were these
worship.
people, since they were border
Hmm.
Hebrews, had they kind of assimilated into the Philistine culture where they were?
Yeah, I don't know.
People
I-
do sometimes when they're
I
living in
I
the
wonder if
fringes.
it's I bet that's probably more realistic. Absolutely. I think in here, what they're saying is, I wonder if they are the Israelites who were telling the story were trying to wrestle with what do we do with our friends on the border who kind of fraternize with the Philistines. Let's just say, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's a little bit more convenient history than they were sympathetic to Philistines
Yeah.
or, mingling with them.
The message is interesting here, that interpretation. That God struck some of the men of Beth Shemesh who out of curiosity irreverently peeked into the chest of God. 70 died. The whole town was in mourning, reeling under the hard blow from God.
Yeah.
Kind of like Lot's wife looking back at
And if you think of it
Mhm.
exactly right in Genesis,
Lot's wife
it
looking back.
is a thing. It's a same as Moses saying, "Can I see you, God?" And he says God basically says it would kill you.
Mhm.
And there's something slightly tragic about that too, of God realizing humans' limitations or us our limitation. And remember, God passes by Moses, but kind of puts his hand out so that Moses can't get blinded or whatever happens. Yeah, it's just, but all of that you can extract a theology, which is just, the closer you get to God, the more dangerous it is. We can only know so much. We can only take so much.
I've heard theories that the Ark of the Covenant was supposedly, like, the contents of it was like full of radiation. I mean, so people would.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
Exposed to it
lore,
would be.
this is where that
exposed to
comes from.
radiation
Wow.
sickness.
Yeah.
So.
right, exactly. Which is again is picked up in Spielberg
So maybe,
movies.
maybe God his energy is kind of like radiation,
Yeah.
where our physical bodies wouldn't
take
be
it.
able to withstand it.
Right. I can't let a Lost reference go by, but a lot of you are doing the Lost class, and without giving away too much as we get into the latter half of the series, there's this idea that the island has these properties
Oh.
that are electromagnetic. So we saw that in chapter 2, and there's light involved, and
Smoke
it's harmful. Like people can be killed the closer they get to the source of the island, with the exception of one person who got exposed and survived, Desmond. So there is this kind of thing where they're drawing upon the culture, even if they don't realize they're drawing upon the culture.
Well,
Although I
and
think
the
they
thing
realize it.
The thing with the son being pregnant, and they're worried that the baby's not going to make it because of it was conceived on the island.
The properties of the island,
Right.
are radioactive or who knows what, and they ultimately don't know.
there's another instance in the Bible where when the ark was being carried and they were crossing a river and they stumbled and two people reached out to steady it and actually touched the ark and they were struck dead. So
Right.
yeah.
Which is why it's carried on poles. Yeah.
Yeah, so
You
through
don't have to
rings,
touch
yeah.
And I think what's important there is there was a word in the message that said irreverently.
Yeah, I like to.
And I think that actually might be the key word in there, which is you can't just walk up to it, just go, what's inside? There's a reverent there, the Levites are the ones who receive it. This is the house of Levi, which is where all the priests had previously come up to this point come from. And, one way to think of it at Grace is if the ark came into Grace, which would be amazing on many levels, but were it to be processed in and I'm dancing in front of it or something, that's a spoiler alert for later in Samuel. We would need the altar guild to handle it. That's kind of like our version of the Levites. We need Chloe and Mary and now Carol's joining the altar guild.
Yeah.
We need people that know what they're doing with these things to kind of deal with it reverently. That's kind of the idea here.
The Levites were the ones that were the priests and able to handle the Ark of the Covenant. So was Aaron was supposedly, he was a Levite then.
Yeah.
So Moses was a Levite.
Is
They
that
were
right?
brothers.
Yeah, that's right.
So
David's
they,
not even saying, yeah.
both of them would be able to touch.
I think because
ark
we don't
and
think
the-
of Moses as a priest, he's not often term him as a Levite, but yes, but
But
Aaron
they
is
were-
kind of like the
They were blood brothers. And they
Sure. Oh,
came
no,
from the same
absolutely.
mother.
Yep.
Actually, no one was allowed to touch the ark. And that's why it had the handles and the rings. At no time was the ark to be touched or handled. Even the Levites, it was sealed. They didn't open it. They didn't use what was inside. They just slipped the poles through these rings and they carried it that way. This was the abode of God, and it was kind of like the burning bush or something that you couldn't open it up because that's where God lived according to their belief. That God
Where did
actually.
this happen though? Because didn't they have to build it? They had to build it, and then all of a sudden
Right.
it just became
Right.
untouchable. Just
Right.
filled
Yes, and
with
then
some kind of a magical power that.
Right.
yeah, then after it was built, then God came down and dwelt in it.
But I like I like this imagery because it's God, the Ark of the Covenant's coming back, but you're not going to control him. You're not going to own him. He's not a possession you now have. Like he'll just still strike you down.
Yeah.
Like there's still this sort of
Oh,
having
yeah,
to be
You
fearful.
can't contain God. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Amazing. Really is. And it's all just another window into how they thought of God, and how they experienced God, which was look but don't touch. Which is really interesting. And again, that word reverent, to them, the Philistines were not reverent. They weren't believers. They weren't people that treated the stuff with the seriousness that it demanded, which is why they're like, okay, what's the first line in this chapter? How do we get rid of this? Yeah. They said, the Philistines captured the ark. No, I'm sorry. Philistines said, what shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us what we should send it, what we should send with it to its place. Get this off our hands. Fabulous. I'm trying to think if we got time to maybe read a little more. Let's see. Maybe we get partway through here. I'm going to read chapter 7 from the NRSV. And the people of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord and brought it to the house of Abinadab on the hill. They consecrated his son Eleazar to have charge of the ark of the Lord. From the day that the ark was lodged at Kiriath Jearim, a long time passed, some 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. Then Samuel said to all the house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away the foreign gods and the Astartes from among you. Direct your heart to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So Israel put away the Baals and the Astartes. I don't know why I'm giving it a Spanish pronunciation. And they served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, gather all Israel at Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered at Mizpah and drew water and poured it out before the Lord. They fasted that day and said, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the people of Israel at Mizpah. When the Philistines heard that the people of Israel had gathered at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the people of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. The people of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, and pray that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines. So Samuel took a sucking lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel, and the Lord answered him. As Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to attack Israel, but the Lord thundered with a mighty voice that day against the Philistines and threw them into confusion, and they were routed before Israel. And the men of Israel went out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and struck them down as far as beyond Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Jeshanah and named it Ebenezer. For he said, thus far the Lord has helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and did not again enter the territory of Israel. The hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. The towns that the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored to Israel, from Ekron to Gath, and Israel recovered their territory from the hand of the Philistines. There was peace also between Israel and the Amorites. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. He went on a circuit year by year to Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah, and he judged Israel in all these places. Then he would come back to Ramah, for his home was there. He administered justice there to Israel and built there an altar to the Lord. The end.
The end.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think you're getting to hear a mix of not transitions, a mix of communities that formed this book. And so one community's story, this kind of 5, 6, 7, these chapters 5, 6, 7, wants to kind of bring this all into the context of a whole thing, but there's more story to tell, Samuel. So we're chapter 8, we kind of go back into the storyline a little bit, but time is skipping for sure. 20 years have passed.
What's a Baals and a Astartes?
Baal, these are other gods, other
okay.
people who
Thank
worship
you.
other gods. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, exactly. Astartes.
Mine says
I don't know. How do
Astaroth.
you say that? Yeah, I don't have a
Mine
clue.
says Astaroth.
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 Doesn't it
In
look
the
like
Hebrew, it's Ashtaroth, and
Huh?
it refers to the name of a Sidonian deity. Yeah,
Oh.
Yeah, that's confusing for me.
I wonder if it's similar to Asheroth, which I've heard of before, so it might be, then they have that, I don't know. I'd have to look that up. But they talk about Asherah and the Asherah poles and things like that, and I don't know if this is related to that or not. It might, Asherah, it might be. I'd have to
My
check that.
Robert Alter footnote says Ashtaroth. The form is a feminine plural of Ashtoreth, which is where you get Astarte, the Canaanite fertility goddess. The plural indicates either a plurality of goddesses or more likely the multiple icons of Astarte.
Yeah, that is Asherah. Yeah, that is that is the god I was thinking of, the Asherah, they have found little idols to Asherah in some of the Hebrew settlements. So it's interesting. Yeah, this is there even some of the Hebrews, especially women, they would pray to the fertility goddess in order to have become fertile and have children.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that's kind of like, even after the New Testament, people still pray to other,
Yeah,
what they consider maybe, I mean, people pray to Mary all the time, and she's,
yeah, we do. We
it's just, they pray to other people other than just
pray to
God.
saints,
Right.
right? Exactly.
So,
It's hard to let some of these traditions go,
well,
even if it's been millennia.
sometimes I think people think, well, I'm not worthy to ask this of God himself. So I'll ask somebody else to
Right.
intervene for me.
And the precise nature of how the saints intercess on our behalf is a mystery. But you kind of imagine, if you've got Mary's attention on something, that maybe she can go get, it's like she's the chief of staff, go
She's the queen
get
of
in,
heaven.
get in
She's
with
the-
God and walk
That's
through
right,
some of the
that's
prayer
right. You got
requests.
his
today.
ear, you got his ear.
She's the queen of heaven.
It's a hard job for Mary, right?
Yeah, come on,
I
Jesus.
wanted to leave you on this thing because it's we did not read the book of Judges, and the whole act of judging is they talk about it here, but they don't get into the details a bit. And so this is from Robert Alter. The precise nature of Samuel's leadership is left ambiguous, as befits a transitional figure in Israel's political evolution. Some of the judging may actually be performance of a judicial function. So kind of acting like an actual judge, like we would think. As the next verse indicates in verse 16, Samuel operated as a kind of circuit judge, although he may well have carried out other cultic or priestly duties as well. The towns in which he stopped are all sites that were had cults or cultic sites. He's also a judge in the sense of a chieftain or political leader, though he plays this role not as a warrior, according to the model of the book of Judges, but as exhorter and intercessor. That's what I was talking about, kind of like someone who prays on our behalf. He is also, as we shall see in the Saul story, a seer, so he's the future, and a reprover prophet. Reprover. So yeah, so you're getting they kind of gloss over it, and then they're going to go back in and drill down on a specific time, critical time in Samuel's time of judging. But yeah, think of him like a priest mixed with a police captain, mixed with a confessor, mixed with sounds like a judge, kind of like doing all kinds of stuff, kind of like a lawyer too, and supposedly, speaking on God's behalf. And notice there that it says the Lord spoke to him, but we don't hear what God said. So there is kind of this now removal, whereas back in Genesis and Exodus, God was very personal, and we heard God speak directly. Now we're hearing that, we're taking Samuel at his word that God talked to him, which might become critical later. Yeah. Fun stuff. All right, everybody. Well, thank you. Next week we'll do chapter 8, and somewhere around there we will get to the introduction of Saul. So that's exciting. Great. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Keep warm.
Bye. Stay warm.